Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. That sound you just heard is coming from San Juan, Puerto Rico, where protests continued over the weekend. Now, if they thought that Puerto Rico was ever going to achieve statehood, I think that more likely than not, Puerto Rico is going to achieve independence. The protests that have erupted against the governor, Puerto Rican Governor Rico, have actually been a long time coming, long before these hurricanes struck a year or so ago. And they're not just about him or the level of corruption around him. The demonstrations actually turned violent last week, and additional demonstrations took place yesterday. They're expecting more protests today. And on the island, the protesters have actually descended to San Juan, and that's resulted in businesses in the tourist area getting boarded up, cruise ships announcing that they're not going to be stopping there. Now, here's a summary of what led us to this point. Protesters last week in Puerto Rico and in New York were accompanied by celebrities in their demands for Puerto Rican Governor Ricardo A. Rosello to resign. The protest broke out, about 7 days ago now, when about 900 pages of rude private messages between the governor and his top officials, including anti-homosexual comments, were leaked. I'm always flabbergasted by officials that are in the public realm that think that 900 pages. I mean, that's a lot of private messages that include homosexual comments and, well, nude photographs too. It's always amazing to me that they think they can get by with it. So the mainland protests were actually a lot different than what took place in Puerto Rico, those that took place in New York. Agitated protests in New York broke out after the leaks on Saturday with a bunch of clashes between protesters and cops over the weekend. But then another Puerto Rican star, Ely, said to the crowds in Old San Juan on the fifth day of protests, "It was about damn time to wake up." Ricky Martin, everybody knows Ricky Martin, right? The Puerto Rican singer. He was actually mentioned in the governor's messages. And those messages targeted Martin's sexuality. The governor wrote, quote, "Ricky Martin is such a male chauvinist that he F's men because women don't measure up. Pure patriarchy," close quote. So Ricky Martin joined the protests in Old San Juan. NBC News producer Annie Ross Ramos was on the ground during the protests, updating with Twitter with live videos throughout the night. And one of the videos that she tweeted out showed the crowd gathered outside Rosello's house, locally known as La Fortaleza in Old San Juan. Now, Ramos' feed continued documenting the cops storming the protesters' barricades, throwing tear gas, firing rubber bullets, and launching what are presumed to be firebombs. The protests erupted in response to the governor's recent scandal referred to as Chatgate. Everybody's got to have a clever name, right? Chatgate or Ricky Leaks. Puerto Rico's Center for Investigative Journalism published 889 pages of a private group chat on Saturday between Rosello and his aides. The messages were filled with offensive and crass language against political adversaries and allies. And look, if you want to say crass things, if you want to say offensive things about your opponents or your neighbors or your friends or me or anybody else, have at it. But this is why you need to be careful what you put in emails or text messages. In one of the messages, the governor wrote that the Federal Oversight Board that's now controlling Puerto Rico's finances, and they have been since 2016, should go F yourself. with a line of middle finger emojis following. You know, he's a mature governor, too. So telling the feds, the American taxpayers, to go F ourselves, and then a string of middle finger emojis. Oh, okay. Rosello's Secretary of State, Luis G. Rivera Marin, he was among the numerous members of the group chat. He was the first, I think. He may have been the first that resigned, or maybe he was let go. I forget which it was. But Rosello dismissed the chat as just a way to relieve stress. That's according to a story in the Washington Post. Now, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, we often refer to it as a U.S. territory. It is a territory, but it's actually a commonwealth. Well, that commonwealth approach has been nothing but a failed experiment for Puerto Rico for a long time. Now, the island is also a complete and total fiscal disaster. So the likelihood of statehood, which was, I think, at one time supported by, at least in spirit, by both parties, by both Republicans and Democrats, I think that chance has dramatically decreased. Now just watch out as this revolution continues to play out, these revolts continue to play out. I don't think anybody's going to be talking about any sort of statehood. I think you'll see a dramatic shift now toward independence. And you know what? I'm all for giving them independence. Because you know what we need? We already have Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, and all of those trying to escape to come to the United States through Mexico. I think what we need now is another S-hole country. Puerto Rico, yes. So I'm starting it right here. Make Puerto Rico an S-hole country. Hang on, I'll be right back. I was watching Netflix over the weekend. I'm kind of addicted to Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. The first couple of seasons weren't all that fantastic. In fact, there were a couple of interviews that he did where I actually found it kind of offensive, only in the sense that they were pretty hoity-toity and pretty full of themselves. But in subsequent seasons, I think Seinfeld actually kind of catched his stride, and he did pretty well of doing interviews and just having kind of good old boy and good old girl chats with other comedians. Well, anyway, this season has now been released on Netflix. So I didn't binge watch. I think I watched 2 episodes out of 12, so that's hardly binge watching. But it did remind me of this story. And it shows that everything, including, we have all of this anxiety. Well, maybe it's not anxiety, but there's all of this discussion about breaking up big tech and trying to apply the antitrust laws to big tech, and everybody's going after big tech. And as I've said 100 times, I've been kind of reluctant to jump on any of those bandwagons because I keep thinking, as in most parts of our daily lives, there's something coming along that we don't know is around the corner yet. Netflix comes along, and Netflix is one of the biggest things ever. And of course, now I forget how many millions of subscribers it has. I think it may be in this story, but that's not the point of the story that I want to make. The point of the story that I want to make is this. Netflix shed $17 billion in value on Thursday as Wall Street punished the leader in streaming media for announcing on Wednesday that it had added only 2.7 million subscribers in the most recent quarter. That was really far less than the 5 million it had previously forecast. So on Thursday, in trading volume more than 5 times its daily average, the stock sunk 10% as all of these Wall Street analysts digested the news, which included the fact that Netflix lost U.S. subscribers for the first time since launching the streaming product, meaning that the entirety of its gain came from international territories. Now, Netflix may, and I haven't checked the stock price this morning to see what it's doing. I'm not an investor in Netflix. I only use that as an example of we get all wrapped around the axle about these big companies. And I don't think most of us comprehend how difficult it is because we live in a society where it is all about growth. Talk to any CEO. Now, I think a CEO should have a long-term strategy that looks out much more than just the next quarter. But that's what most boards of directors and everybody gets wrapped up about is how are we doing this quarter? How are we going to do next quarter? How much are we growing? And so Netflix estimates that it's going to achieve an additional 5 million subscribers, and it actually added only 2.7 million, and almost all of those came from international territories. So what's the point? The point is these big companies are always struggling to stay alive. They're always struggling to stay ahead of whatever the next big thing is. I don't know what the next big thing is, but I want to take Netflix and apply it to big tech. Facebook's come out with Libra. They want to call it a cryptocurrency, but it's more like a token. It's more like a token for exchange of value. It's not really a currency or even a cryptocurrency to speak of. But nonetheless, Facebook is doing all of these things, trying to find additional revenue streams. Well, any company should always be trying to find additional revenue streams so they can continue their growth. But while politicians and then talk show hosts and everybody else gets all wrapped up about Facebook censoring this or Facebook censoring that, we never look at the long term. And the long term means that if they really do continue to censor conservatives, it may take a while. And it's not like, when Facebook started, Facebook didn't have a bazillion subscribers the first day that it opened up for business. So when Gab and when Minds and some of these other new social media platforms come about, they're not instantaneous hits. But what they do indicate to me is this. My theory that there's always something else coming along is true. We just may not see it yet, or we may not realize that that is the next big thing. So while the politicians are over here talking about breaking it up, applying the anti-Sherman law, the Sherman antitrust laws, while they're over there thinking about all of those things, over here on the other side, Minds and Gab and everything else is slowly but surely taking off. The point, if we sit back, the marketplace will pretty much tell us who deserves to succeed and who deserves to die. The marketplace is very efficient if we just allow the marketplace to be the marketplace. Hang on, I'll be right back. I think I mentioned in a podcast, probably a month ago. I'd have to go back and look at the index. But Mexico had sent some troops to its southern border. And part of that was in response to the President Trump, threatening tariffs and threatening to break down trade negotiations and everything else with Mexico. And so Mexico decided that they were going to at least make a token effort to do some sort of immigration enforcement on its southern border. Well, according to the Wall Street Journal, only 4 large groups of migrants were caught trying to cross the U.S.-Mexico border since they started that additional enforcement in June. And according to Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McLennan, no large groups have been seen so far this month. He said last week that while U.S. border authorities have encountered groups of more than 100 people in the past, with the biggest being more than 1,000 people, large group crossings have actually declined in recent weeks. He told the House Oversight and Reform Committee, quote, "This year has been unlike any other we have seen in our history, with well over 150 large groups of more than 100 migrants crossing together. But since Mexico has started to do their interdiction operations, addressing the transportation networks on their highways, we have seen a dramatic drop. Tens of thousands of Central American families and unaccompanied children." Let me emphasize that again, unaccompanied children. So for all those yahoos out there that say, we shouldn't put these unaccompanied kids in a detention center, what are you supposed to do with them? They're 15 years old. I would assume that those 4 yahoos and the Democrats and all the ones running for president would not want us to just turn loose into the Texas desert or the Mexican or the New Mexico desert or the Arizona desert. Just turn loose 12, 13, or 14 years old. If they're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, I assume the same thing. I just want to emphasize that a lot of these kids that are in detention centers are here because they showed up as unaccompanied children. Well, anyway, back according to the Wall Street Journal, tens of thousands of Central American families and unaccompanied children have arrived monthly in the past year, obviously straining the resources of everybody working on the border. But the U.S. moved last week to slash Central American migrants' ability to seek asylum with that rule I told you about, mandating that, with some exceptions, migrants who pass through another country first must seek asylum in that country rather than at the U.S. border. Meaning that if you come from El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, whatever, and you cross into Mexico, you must apply for asylum in Mexico. Now, I want them to take the rule further, and I want them to require that before they even cross I get that if they've already crossed the border and they apply in that country, that's fine. But what we ought to be doing is encouraging them to apply for asylum in their own country. Mexico reported a record 29,000 migrants detained in June, according to figures provided this month by Mexico's migration agency. They also deported close to 22,000 illegal migrants last month. Now, you can take this at face value, but I'll say this. President Trump and his praise for Mexico's stepped-up efforts to stop the migrants and his claim that it was the result of his threat of tariffs, unless somebody can show me some other causal link, some other cause for this huge drop in migration from Mexico, I'm willing to look at it. Until then, credit goes to Donald Trump. Hang on, I'll be right back. On Saturday, there was a Georgia lawmaker who claimed that a man had told her to, quote, go back to her country. And it trended all over Twitter on Saturday with Democratic politicians like Ted Lieu, Beto O'Rourke, supporting her, and then people creating a hashtag on Twitter, I stand with Erica. So she tweeted out on Friday, July 19th, this. Today, I was verbally assaulted in the grocery store by a white man who told me I was a lazy SOB and to go back to where I came from because I had too many items in the express lane. Let me just stop this for just a moment. When I get in the express lane and I see somebody that can't count, and by the way, what is the appropriate amount that you can go over? If it's 12 items or less, can you get by with 15? If it's 15 items or less, can you get by with 18? Or should you follow the letter of the law? And if it says 12 items or less, it should be 12 items or less. And have you ever stood there and counted? And actually, I've counted in my own bag, in my own cart, to see how many I had before I went in, because I know what I do, and if I'm counting, I know somebody behind me might be counting. But whether she did or did not have too many items in her basket as she went through the express lane, there's no evidence that she did or she did not. But if she did, somebody should have said something to her anyway. Or maybe it's because she's a Georgia lawmaker. Maybe it's because she's a Georgia state representative that she thinks that, well, those rules don't apply to her either. Anyway, back to the story. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. That was the tangent for the week until tomorrow. So she tweeted out on Friday the 19th. Today I was verbally assaulted in the grocery store by a white man who told me I was a lazy SOB and to go back to where I came from because I had too many items in the express lane. My husband wasn't there to defend me because he is on active duty serving the country I came from, USA, ! And of course, Congressman Ted Lieu, the doofus from California, jumps in with a hashtag I stand with Erica and retweets her tweet with this. Both at Real Donald Trump and at GOP have grossly underestimated the number of Americans who have experienced the racist go back insult. We all know how it hurts, and we are going to vote. I predict a dim wave in 2020, just like we had in 2018. And the Irishman who likes to pretend he's Hispanic, Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke, quite the Hispanic surname, right? He tweeted out on Saturday, These are the consequences of a president who foments hate every day and sees our diversity not as a strength, but as a weakness. Erica, thank you for serving your state, and thanks to your husband for serving our country. We are better than this, and together we will prove it. Uh-oh, but guess what? Turns out, as these stories often do, turns out it was a bunch of hooey. Now she was interviewed by a local Georgia station, and she's now backtracking, admitting that, well, he didn't actually say that.
He said, go back, those types of words. I don't want to say, he said, go back to your country or...
Oh, I don't want to say he said, go back to your country. Let's go back up. Today I was verbally assaulted in the grocery store, she tweeted, by a white man, got to point out that it's a white man, who told me I was a lazy SOB and to go back to where I came from. That's exactly what she tweeted. But when she's confronted by a real reporter asking what was really said,
He said, go back, those types of words. I don't want to say, he said, go back to your country or go back to where you came from, but he was making those types of references is what I remember.
So, which was it? There's always these hate hoaxes, and now we have the hoaxes, the hoax tweets and everything else. I don't know why people, well, I do know why, because everybody craves attention and everybody wants attention. Everybody wants to, this is the big thing in the news and I want to be a part of whatever happens to be the big thing in the news. So speaking of Twitter, remember I said earlier that eventually Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of these big, Pinterest, I guess now is censoring things. At some point, the insanity is going to get so bad that these other social media platforms, or one platform that we're not even aware of, that someone's creating right now, will come in and just sweep the others away. Here's an example of why I believe that. Twitter reportedly, now I haven't been able to confirm because I can't get access to this particular woman's Twitter account, so it may or may not be back up this morning. I haven't checked this morning, but I couldn't locate it over the weekend. But Twitter reportedly suspended the account of a woman by the name of Mary Ann Mendoza. She is an angel mom who lost her son to an illegal alien in 2014. And ostensibly the reason that Twitter suspended the account was because she criticized Democratic presidential candidate and California Senator Kamala Harris. Now, according to Breitbart News, Twitter suspended the account of the mother after she made a series of tweets that were critical of Harris's stance on illegal immigration in sanctuary cities. Mendoza told Breitbart News, quote, "I'm disgusted and disappointed that Twitter is trying to silence me. I had my world ripped out from under me the day my son was killed by a repeat illegal alien. I am the other side of this crisis and the end result of open borders and the careless release of illegal aliens at our borders because of time restraints." She's exactly right. And indeed, if Twitter did that, you see, I think over time that begins to build, and there will eventually be a backlash, just like it's been building in Puerto Rico all this time, and eventually there's going to be a backlash. You see what's happening in Hong Kong as they try to change some of the extradition rules in Hong Kong. These things take time, but they build to a crescendo, and I think that might happen with big tech too. Hang on, I'll be right back. So you know this nut job Marianne Williamson, who is running for president on the Democrat ticket. Marianne Williamson's. She was in the Pyramid Unity Church of Houston, and I guess she decided it was time for us all to have a kumbaya moment. So she asked everyone to stand. Well, she first asked the blacks to stand, and then she went through this.
So to the African Americans in the room who would wish and be willing to participate in this, please stand up. And now I'd like to ask white Americans who are sitting near you to please stand up, and if the African American citizen would be willing to allow a white American who wishes to apologize to you and take part in this to hold your hands. And now as I speak, I'm going to ask the white Americans in the room to please repeat after me. On behalf of myself and on behalf of my country. To you and all African Americans. From the beginning of our nation's history. In honor of your ancestors and on behalf of your children. Please hear this from my heart. I apologize. Please forgive us.
Hashtag bite me. Just bite me. Here's the only thing, though. There's a part of me who would like to see Marianne Williamson win the Democrat nomination because I'd really like to see her in that soft kind of hippie voice. Or maybe even become president. And instead of, like Trump's got Mar-a-Lago. Bill Clinton borrowed every, summer White House that he went to. Bush had the ranch. Reagan had his ranch. Marianne Williamson, Sedona, Arizona. She'll go to Sedona, Arizona. There'll be beads and crystals hanging, candles, peace. She'll bring about peace in our time. The thing that bugs me about that, though, in all seriousness, what really bugs me about that is this idea that me, or that you need to apologize to anybody for anything that this country has done in the past. Now, I've got a lot of Asian friends. Let me rephrase that. I've got a lot of Japanese friends. I feel no compulsion. I feel no obligation, responsibility, moral or otherwise, to apologize to them for what FDR did with the internment camps during World War II. My grandfather, of course, I've told you in the past, Cherokee Indian. I have no compulsion, obligation, or feeling of desiring an apology from any American for the Trail of Tears that forced his family out of southeastern United States into Texas and Oklahoma. This whole apology tour stuff has got to stop. If you owe an apology to an individual or maybe to a team that you manage or say, go do those apologies. But these other apologies, bite me. In the hypocritical story of the day, Bernie Sanders, who is an advocate of making employees pay $15 an hour, was not paying his salaried people the equivalent of $15 an hour. Now go figure that out. Now, as people got upset, and now he is, what do you think he's doing in response to the demand that they be paid $15 an hour? He's cutting their hours so they will be earning what he wants to make everyone else pay. Let me say that again. Bernie Sanders' employees, his salaried employees, were complaining that they weren't making $15 an hour. They got upset, and according to the Washington Post, demanded that they earn at least $15 an hour. So he decided the way to accomplish that was to cut back on their hours so that they will be earning what he wants to make everybody else pay. According to the Washington Post, amid a pay war within his own 2020 presidential campaign, Bernie Sanders will now limit the amount of time his organizers can work to guarantee that no one is making less than $15 an hour, a wage the senator has demanded should be the federal minimum. On Thursday evening, the Washington Post reports that some members of Sanders' campaign have been lobbying to raise their wages. Field organizers say they make a salary of $36,000 annually, but work 60 hours or more per week, which is an average of $13 an hour. Unionized workers planned to send a letter to campaign manager Fazee Shakir, which read that, quote, many field staffers are barely managing to survive financially, which is severely impacting our team's productivity and morale. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. Some employees, they said, had even left the campaign as a result of the low pay. In a statement provided to Newsweek, Shakir said that the campaign had been in discussions about pay structure changes with the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 400, the union representing the organizers. Shakir said, quote, "We look forward to continuing those discussions and obviously are disappointed that some individuals decided to damage the integrity of these efforts before they were concluded. As these discussions continue, we are limiting hours so no employee is receiving less than $15 for any hours worked." You know, it's almost as if a $15 an hour minimum wage results in some sort of cutbacks, whether it be in hours worked by existing employees or in hiring fewer employees. How can that be possible? Bernie, what's going on, baby? What's going on? Hang on. I'll be right back. Now, this is going to be a hard segment to do because I need to describe things, but I would encourage you that you might want to go to all of the candidates' websites and look at the merchandise that they have to offer. And the reason I'm doing this particular story is because good friends of ours, I may have told you that we were, I think I mentioned this in last week's podcast, that we were having dinner at a particular restaurant and we were having difficulty getting straws. And then when they did bring us straws, they brought us these really crappy paper straws. And let's just say that Tamara, my spouse, my wife, was she wasn't very happy about it. Well, I get an email or text message from one of my friends that was at dinner with us that night about a place where you can purchase straws. But before I get to that, I want to work backwards into it because looking at those straws that I could buy online made me look at what other candidates are offering. So let's go to the Democrats, right? Bill de Blasio doesn't even have an online store. Steve Bullock, who I guess is still running, has a very pedestrian campaign site, no store. Let's see, Mike Gravel doesn't have a store. I think I did come across what I think were parody items on another site that said stuff like Mike Gravel, property is theft. There's absolutely nothing of interest in the online campaign stores of Amy Klobuchar, the accidental Senator Michael Bennet, or Tom Steyer. Tim Ryan's store is apparently trying hard to push merchandise among the residents of Youngstown, Ohio, the center of his congressional district. It's like you got to run outside your congressional district, bucko, but who am I to tell him how to run things? Then there's kind of so those don't even register. Then you have the really insipid stuff. Julian Castro cartoon portrait stickers. He's making heavy use of the diacritic, the acento in Spanish over the A in Julian. He's turning it into what I guess is supposed to be a flame. I don't know what that's all about. Kamala Harris has a bus rider T-shirt. Now I've got to admit that her logo is actually kind of snazzy. You know, she was doing that, selling a T-shirt about the debate she had over Joe Biden. So, you know, you got that stuff. Jay Inslee has authored a children's book. Robert O'Rourke, Beto, the Irishman running for as a Hispanic. If you're some kind of gabacho trying to play act, I'm not very good in Spanish, but he's got kind of a hairnet thing of some sort going on in his store. Elizabeth Warren has stickers. Everybody's got stickers, really? So that's kind of the insipid stuff. And then there's the really uninspiring stuff. Cory Booker has a trans pride pin. Seriously? Pete Buttigieg has a coffee mug. You can't get any more creative than a coffee mug. Kristen Gillibrand T-shirts. Bernie Sanders throwback T-shirts. And then you have, in no particular order, Tulsi Gabbard has buttons. Marianne Williamson has a logo coffee mug. Joe Biden has a pride tank top. John Hickenlooper has a can koozie. Yeah. Better not order me one of those. Actually, in one of them, it has our mountains. while at the same time representing the stripes of the American flag. So he's not going to get the Colin Kaepernick endorsement, but I don't think Hickenlooper is going to get anybody's endorsement. John Delaney has a phone ring stand. Andrew Yang has a math label pen. But in first place, guess who comes in first place? Donald Trump. Trump plastic straws. I'm ordering these because here's what I want to do. Any place where they give me, well, let me go back and describe it first. I don't think any Democrat can hold a candle to the best piece of merchandise in an online campaign store, and that's Donald Trump's plastic straws. They're fantastic. You know why? They're plastic, they're red, and near the end of one of the tips, just in kind of silver lettering, is the word Trump. A pack of 10 goes for $15. BPA free, reusable and recyclable, 9 inches long. And ladies, they are 9 inches long. Pack of 10 identical straws as shown, laser engraved and made right here in the good old US of A. So here's what we want to do. We want to buy a bunch of these plastic straws. And I think there are 2 or 3 places where we're going to use them. One, those places where we ask for a straw and they bring us a paper straw. We're going to open the paper straw, and then we're going to kind of wad it up, and we're going to use the plastic Trump straw. And then before we leave, we're going to very carefully pull the Trump plastic straw out and lay it right across the plate so that the word Trump is obvious to the waiter, the waitress, the busboy, whomever. Then the second place we're going to use them, regardless of whether they give us plastic straws or not, is someone that is obviously liberal or makes a comment or somehow indicates to us that they are anti-Trump. And we're going to leave the plastic straws there. And then, of course, the places where they don't offer straws at all, we'll pull out our handy-dandy red plastic Trump straws. And then once again, when we're done, we will leave them carefully placed on the plate so that the straw is obvious, you can't miss it, and you can't miss the word Trump. Now, if anybody wants to get me a gift for Christmas, or let's see what's coming up. I guess we've got Labor Day coming up. A nice Labor Day gift. A Trump straw pack of 10. Only $15 at donaldjtrump.com. Hang on, be right back. This next story, I'm not making fun of the reporter, so I want to make that abundantly clear. But you know that, President Trump, in whatever fashion, said to one of the Gang of Four, in particular Ilhan Omar, that if she didn't like America, and she has been very virulently anti-American and anti-Semitic, that she should just go back to her country and try to fix it, and then come back and tell us how to do that. Well, this well-known journalist decided that it was a wise idea to go to Somalia, to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's homeland. She wanted to go to prove that it was a safe and beautiful nation, and she paid with her life. Hodin Nalaya immigrated to Canada with her parents when she was a kid, the exact same way that Congresswoman Omar did when she immigrated to the United States. But this reporter, Nalaye, she wanted to go to Somalia and prove that the narrative about her nation of origin was incorrect and that it was a peaceful nation, according to CNN. She said on an Instagram on May 1st, "Beautiful thoughts create a beautiful life. What a blessing to be back home in hashtag Somalia after 30-plus years away." And then she continued on Instagram, "This will be my first hashtag Ramadan back home. Inshallah, let's make dua for our country and people. Leave your duas below. Reading positive words changes your brain chemistry. Had an amazing time filming in," and I'm going to bastardize these words, and I don't mean to. Had an amazing time filming in Gubweon with architect and this person's name, who came back to Somalia from Italy, she said in another story. This beautiful place is where the Juba River and the Indian Ocean meet in Somalia in the outskirts of Kismayo. Our country is beautiful. But last week, unfortunately, she witnessed the other part of Somalia, the dangerous part, and it took the lives of both her and her husband. So this woman, Hodon Nalaya, she's a prominent Somalia-Canadian journalist and YouTube star, was critically wounded during the attack and later died in a hospital, according to the police. Another journalist, Mohammed Salar Omar, who worked for the Puntland-based Somali Broadcasting Corporation, was shot dead while attempting to photograph the attackers inside the hotel. So she goes back, trying to prove what a wonderful country it is, and ends up dying in a terrorist attack. So I think, when Ilhan Omar criticizes the United States, and look, she's come here, she immigrated here. Now, whether she did it lawfully or unlawfully remains to be seen, because the Star Tribune is doing a series of news articles that indicate that she may have actually committed immigration fraud. I mean, literally committed immigration fraud to come here. So she comes here, and let's just assume for a moment that she, for the sake of argument, that she came to this country lawfully. She immigrated the right way. She became a naturalized citizen. And now she's a United States congressman. But she constantly denigrates this country. She is an absolute, unequivocal anti-Semite. So when Trump says maybe you ought to go back to your own country and fix it, and she says somehow that that's racist and wrong, well, somebody went back to their country. This journalist went back to that same country, Somalia, trying to prove what a wonderful country it was. And she and her husband and others ended up dead because of terrorist attacks and the ongoing civil war. Let that soak in. And in particular, let it soak in before you start criticizing this country. You're an American citizen and you have a right to criticize this country. But let's get a little perspective, okay? You came here from an S-hole country. You owe this country a debt of gratitude. You can criticize it, and I'll allow you to criticize it. Well, you have a right to criticize it. But you know what? I think you ought to be much more appreciative than what you really are. Hang on, I'll be right back. So this segment we ought to call the Darwin Wards segment. Experts are alerting the public about a new dangerous drug trend called wasping. What do you think this is? Take a listen.
High by combining meth with bug spray.
It's a new dangerous drug trend called wasping, and it's causing alarm in Summit County. Tonight, a warning from police: stay away from wasping, which can cause hallucinations or even kill you. Bob Jones live in Akron with a story you will only see here on News 5. Bob, this is some seriously scary stuff.
How about some seriously stupid stuff? Wasp spray? Seriously?
Well, an inspector with the Summit County Sheriff's Department told me he had never heard of it. And then suddenly, 3 cases within the past week, sending 2 people to the hospital. We're talking about an insecticide that's supposed to be used to kill wasps, but investigators say some people are using it and mixing it with meth.
It's causing hallucinations and excessive heart rate, high heart rates, flush sweating.
It's a white foam, a poisonous spray meant to eliminate wasps and hornets. But in a scary new trend, some drug users are now cutting it with meth for a dangerous combination high. They call it wasping.
Some are spraying it on the meth, some are spraying it in a manner where they can heat it up then and crystallize it. And then once it's crystallized, they then heat it up again and shoot it into their veins.
In 3 different cases over the last few days, 2 men and a woman who appeared to be high were arrested. Inside the jail, the hallucinations started.
Her body started to contort. It almost looked, if you spray a wasp, how they kind of shrivel up and their body kind of cinches up. That's kind of how she looked.
Inspector Bill Holland says all 3 of them admitted to wasping. 2 had to be rushed to a hospital. They survived.
Once it's all over, they have no recollection of what happened.
Very dangerous.
Dr. Gary Thrasher is with Oriana House, a drug treatment facility.
Methamphetamines by themselves can cause psychotic behavior, sometimes paranoia, and even violence. And combining it with another substances that's abused is very problematic.
Inspector Holland worries there could be more wasping cases and is urging people to not even think about mixing the insect killer with meth.
It's very dangerous. It could be deadly for people, and we don't want that to happen, but we do want to make people aware of what's going on out there.
And Dr. Thrasher tells me he, too, had not heard of any local wasping cases until now. Tonight, he is stressing there are plenty of places to go if you need help for treatment for addiction or abuse. Live in Akron tonight, Bob Jones, News 5.
Now here's what I'd like to know, and I'm being serious about this. So here's a really nice 2-minute 34 segment on the local news about wasping, about people combining wasp insecticide with methamphetamines and somehow snorting that, cooking it, injecting it, whatever. And obviously it's a deadly combination. So they do, the local news does a story about it, and the local sheriff talks about how dangerous it is, and they've got an expert from a rehabilitation center talking about how deadly it is, and on and on and on. And so, I can just see, typical, stereotypical American family sitting around the dinner table, and the news is on the background, and, they're watching this, and they're thinking to themselves, how stupid do you have to be to combine meth and wasp spray? And then you got, some teenager in his bedroom who watches it, and, he's never going to try meth, or we hope he's never going to try meth. And so he's not going to do it. Then you got people like you and me. We're watching or hearing this story, and we're thinking, well, that's really stupid. Who would do that? So all of the people that I've now described are probably most likely, more likely than not, are never going to combine wasp spray and methamphetamines. So who's the story directed to? Do the people that are using meth, do you think they're sitting around in the trailer that's about to explode, or the house that's about to explode from cooking meth, or that are, you've seen the images of people, they got like 9 images in a row. Here's where the person never used meth, and then the progression as they continue to use meth until you get to the last photograph, and it looks like they're barely alive. Is the news story directed toward that person, the person who's already using meth? Are they sitting around? Do the drug addicts, do the homeless people, do they sit around watching television and they go, holy crap, I was thinking about getting some wasp spray and putting it in with my meth because I had heard from, Billy Bob down the street over on the other encampment somewhere that this was a really great way to get high, but now I've heard this story. Now I don't think I'll do that. Or somebody thinks, tomorrow I was going to go start using meth. But now having heard this story, I've decided not to. I guess I'm just wondering, who are these stories meant? Who's the target audience? Because the target audience, the people who are watching this at home, are not going to be using meth in the first place. And do you think it's really going to, those who are intent on using meth, do you think it's going to stop them from doing it? I've never understood this. Just dying to know. Who was thinking about using wasp spray and meth, sees this story and goes, oh, I'm not going to do that now. So probably on Wednesday, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, but probably on Wednesday, Robert Mueller is going to testify before the Congress. Well, last week, on Thursday, Judicial Watch and the Daily Caller News Foundation released 84 pages of documents. And those documents reveal that the Obama State Department was central to advancing the Russian collusion hoax narrative prior to the 2016 presidential election. Part of those documents included a September 2016 email exchange between then Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, remember that name, and Special Coordinator for Libya, Jonathan Winter, a close associate of dossier author Christopher Steele, discussing having a face-to-face meeting on a, quote, Russia matter. According to an op-ed Winter wrote for the Washington Post in 2018, also in September 2016, Steele and I met in Washington and discussed the information now known as the dossier. I prepared a 2-page summary and shared it with Newland at the State Department, who indicated that, like me, she felt that the Secretary of State needed to be made aware of this material. Now, the documents obtained by Judicial Watch also show that State Department officials continued to use unsecured BlackBerry devices for the transmission of classified material more than a year after Hillary Clinton's use of that unsecured non-government email system was revealed. And then last month, the Daily Caller also reported that Winter facilitated meetings between Christopher Steele and private consulting firms and had contact with Glenn Simpson, the founder of Fusion GPS, that's the opposition research firm that hired Christopher Steele on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the DNC. Winter is also linked to a second dossier on Trump, this one authored by Cody Shearer, a controversial political operative who is closely allied to the Clintons. It's amazing how all of these are tied together. You know, Judicial Watch and the Daily Caller News Foundation are doing an incredible job of pointing this stuff out. So the question is, will Republicans be smart enough to ask Bob Mueller the right questions on Wednesday and bring this type of material up? Because it's clear, I would say it's unassailable that the Obama State Department, and I think more likely than not the Obama White House, knew about the dossier, knew that it was coming from Christopher Steele, knew that there was no truth to it, and allowed all of this to go forward in terms of the FISA warrants and in terms of getting the Russian collusion hoax started. We might be very close to all of this imploding. It depends on what Robert Mueller does on Wednesday. I'll be sure and let you know. We got a taxpayer relief shot. This one comes to us from Pueblo, Colorado. The Pueblo Popos say that one person has died after an officer-involved shooting that started with a call for a domestic disturbance just before 8 p.m. last Thursday. A spokesperson tells News 5 officers were attacked by a man with a knife once they arrived at the home. The 4 Pueblo Police Department officers opened fire on the man. 53-year-old Patrick David Martinez later died at the hospital. None of the officers involved in the incident were injured. According to Carl Winder, KOAA-TV, deadly officer-involved shooting, says one person is dead after an officer-involved shooting on the 1700 blah, 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 blah. You know, proving once again, you lunge the cops, you come at the cops with a knife, particularly where there's a domestic disturbance call, because that means the cops are already on high alert that either violence has already been perpetrated or is about to be perpetrated on an individual, and then you come running out of the house with a knife, yeah, you're going to end up DRT, dead right there. So thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. You know the drill. You can follow us on iTunes. If you follow us on iTunes, be sure and leave a 5-star rating and leave a nice review if you have time to do that. You can get us on the iHeart app now. And, of course, you can continue to get us on Spreaker, Android. You can download us with any podcast app that you use. And then the final thing I would ask, in order to help us grow, is be sure and share the podcast with your friends. Follow us on all the social media accounts, which you can find on my website, michaelbrowntoday.com. michaelbrowntoday.com. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, they're all there. And I would remind you on Facebook that if you like the Michael Brown page, facebook.com/Michael D. Brown, there is an internal discussion group called Michael Brown Unplugged. Now, we're limiting that. You have to ask for approval to join simply because we don't want a bunch of troublemakers in that group. We want a bunch of people who are actually fans of the podcast. And if you like that, if you like the page, then make a request to join the group. And the reason I suggest you do that is I don't allow people to just make comments on the page because I don't have time to monitor that. But within the discussion group, you can start your own discussion. You can leave comments. You can do whatever you want within that discussion group So like the Facebook page and then ask to join Michael Brown Unplugged, the discussion group. And, it'll be fun because all of you can interact with each other. So once again, thanks for listening to this episode, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.